Hey everyone, how are you guys doing? And welcome to day 8, where we will be learning about CSS grid and shadows. And let me know how are you guys finding these sessions so far. It's been 8 days we have had 8 sessions so far, and we have learned quite a lot of things right from the basics, and now we're moving on to more advanced CSS topics. So let me know how are you finding the content of the things that you have learned so far. Are you guys able to follow along? You can let me know in the comments. Okay, so it's good to know that you guys are able to follow along. So about remembering, yeah, you guys need to practice basically. So you will, as you practice different, projects, different types of challenges, you will be able to figure out which, concept to use at that given point of time. So practice, that is what is going to make you a better web developer. So there's a question in the chat, which stack we will be learning, mean or Mern. We will be learning, not learning, we will be learning Mern stack, okay, by the end of this boot camp. In the front end, we will be focusing on React. So the front end boot camp is 3 months long. It will get over sometime in September, and then your backend sessions will start, which should probably have those topics. Okay, so let's get started with today's session. We will be learning Tailwind, just figuring out when we should introduce it to you guys, whether we should introduce it, towards the end of JavaScript or when we begin with React. So we'll have more clarity on it in, a couple of more days. But stick around, we will definitely be learning about Tailwind. All right, so let's get started with today's class. It's about CSS grid. That is the first topic which we will be learning today. So I have this index.html ready. There's a div which has this container class, and there are 5 elements inside it: first item, second item, and so on. Okay, let's start this. So you can see all of these items over here. So we will be learning about CSS grid, right? So in order to get started with that, we need to set the display to grid. And what is unique about the CSS grid layout is that it allows us to lay out all of the items in rows and columns. All right, so the first thing that we will be doing is that to this container which has all of these items, we will be setting the display to grid. Okay, so far nothing has changed. Then what we want to do is we want to organize our these items into rows. Okay, so for that, what we will be doing is we will be writing, um, actually before that we want to organize our these items into columns. Okay, so suppose we want to create a 3 columns and 2 rows. So the way we create columns is that we specify a width, for example 200 pixels, Then for the next column, let's say we give it a 40 rem space, and the remaining one takes up 30% of the space. Okay, so let me save this, and you can see that we have columns over here. Let's split them in rows as well. So we define rows by specifying grid template rows. So the first row should take up 300 pixels, for example, and the next row should take up, say, 40%. Okay, so you can see that we have created this. We have the first item, we have the second item, then we have the, let me expand this slightly. So we have the first item, right? Then we have the second item, the third item, and then we have the fourth item, and then the fifth item. Okay, to make this more visually understanding, let me give these items, or rather I have this item, let me give it a background color of coral. Okay, so you can see that we have this thing available to us. There is no spacing right now, so what we will do is we will introduce a gap of 16 pixels. Let me save this. So you can see we have the items laid out for us right now. Okay, so let's inspect this in the developer tools, and let me dock it at the bottom. Trying to zoom the developer tools for you guys, and you can see that we have this container. It has this grid keyword besides it, which is coming from the Chrome developer tools. So a couple of things, a couple of terminologies that we need to understand with respect to grid. So if you go to this layout tab and you have this selected, you can enable this option. Okay, show line numbers. All right, so you can see that we have some lines over here, right? Actually, let me do one thing. Let me take a different, slightly lighter color, light blue, for example. Okay, so you can see these numberings, right? So we have lines over here. This is the first line. Okay, for the first column, this is the first column. This is the second column, then this is the third column. All right, so this is known as a line. All right, so these are the lines for the all the columns. Then the space between two lines, okay, that is known as a track. All right, so what we are seeing over here is this is a track, this is a track, right? From here to here, this is a track, and this is a track. Okay, so what we have specified over here is that the number of tracks that we will be having. All right, so we will have the first column, and the track size is 200 pixels. Then we have the next column, right? And you can see that it is, so we are seeing the first column. You can, if you see over here, let me zoom this a bit more. Yeah, so we have this this element available to us. You can see that it has received a width of 200, right? And whatever was equivalent of 40 rem, that width has been set for the second column. Okay, and for the third column, we can see that whatever is 30% of the remaining space, it has received that. Okay, so this is basically taking up 30%. And then if you're noticing, all the items, they are being, you know spread across in rows. Okay, so the items are laid out like this: first item, second item, third item, then the fourth one, and then the fifth one. Okay, so they have been laid out in rows, and we are following this particular syntax. And similarly, if you notice, we have specified the height of the row, right? So you can see that all of the items on the first row are having a height of 300. Okay, right? And all of these are having a 40% height. All right, so this is how you can define columns and rows in a grid layout, and the items get arranged in that fashion. All right, so this is the very basic and a very simple grid which we have defined right now. So let me know if it is clear to you guys. Okay, so far, if you guys have any doubts. Okay, all right, so there are no doubts so far. You guys are clear. Let me move on to the next topic. And yeah, another terminology that I wanted to clarify is that, so this individual item that you're seeing right now, this dark blue shade, this is known as a grid cell. Okay, so it is intersection of, uh, whenever a track, a row level track and a column level track, wherever they intersect, that is known as a grid cell. Okay, so these are the tracks for the, this is the first track for the row, and this is the next track for the row, and this is the first track for the column, second track for the column, and third track for the column. Okay, so I hope the terminologies are clear to you guys. Let's move on to the next topic, which is intrinsic values. So let me stop this. Let's move on to intrinsic values. Let's go live with this particular example. All right. So let me explain what has been done over here. So we have three items over here. There is some text. All right. And this one has some long text. Okay. And over here, I have created a section which has internally four sections. There is a label and there's a radio button, input type radio. So the first value is auto, then the next value is min content, max content, and fit content. And so these are the different radio options that we have, which we can see over here. Okay. Then what we want to do is let's take a look at the style for this. So we have this variable, okay, this custom property which is specifying the column track size as auto. We have three columns which have the track size set as auto. Okay, so what that is doing is that whatever is the amount of space which is needed by a column, right, based on the content, it is taking up that much space only. Okay, so we have not defined a fixed column size right now. The second item needs a bit more space than the first one, so it has a larger width, and the third item is taking up space which it needs, and also there is some space available, so it is stretching across. Okay, so whenever we set the we specify the size of a column as auto, it will try to fill up the entire space available for that is available. So it will basically try to stretch within its container. Okay, so we have this container, right, and it has a max width of 400 pixels. So it will basically stretch all of these columns according to the space available, and will try to fill up the entire space. That is why this one, the third one, basically has some extra space which is available to us. So what we want to do is, as we are selecting these options, we want to reset this column track size, and we want to understand the different column sizes that we can set. All right, so for that, let me do one thing. Let me create a main.js over here. What we want to do is we want to say document uh, dot query selector all. We want to get all the input elements, and we want to uh, so this will give us an array, right? So another way to loop through all the elements is by using the for each loop, and we will get the input or the radio option over here. And what we want to do is for each of the radio, let me call it as radio input, radio input. Okay, we want to add an event listener, and we want to listen to the change event, and this function should get executed whenever the change event happens. So this will receive an event object as an argument. All right, so this is another way to basically loop on the items of an array. Okay, so for each iteration we are getting an individual radio input type radio, and for each of that element we want to listen to the change event. And when that happens, what we want to do is we want to say document dot query selector. So if you notice over here, not this style file, this style file, this custom property has been defined at this element, right, at the container level. So we want to find the element which has the container class, and we want to access the style for that element. And through JavaScript we can access custom properties as well. So the way we do that is we make use of the set property function, and it allows us to, and we specify the name of the property which we want to access, so which is this variable, and based on the value which we are getting for the option that we are selecting, right, we want to set that value to this column track size variable. So we will say event dot target dot value. All right, so whenever we are clicking on a particular option, we will try to update this custom property and set its value. All right, and we want to do this when the DOM content has loaded. So we will add another event listener, DOM content loaded, which tells us that all the elements have been loaded. Okay, they have been passed and the content has been loaded. And we want to add this script over here. So we'll say script source main.js. All right, Now let's take a look at what happens when we change it to min content. So min content, what this basically does is that it is setting the width of each column to the width of its largest word. Okay, so over here item is the largest word, so this column is receiving the width of the largest word. So based on the content, right, okay, the grid will try to figure out what should be the size for that column. Okay, so that is what it means by intrinsic values. Depending on the content which is present inside the columns, the layout will determine the size for that column. So we have different options to how we want to calculate the intrinsic size for that particular layout. So we looked at auto. The next one is min content. So when we set the value as min content, okay, if we notice over here, we have this container and you can see that the column track size has been set to min content. And similarly over here, this is the longest word, right? All the other words are of some or the other length, but this was the longest word. Okay, so whatever is the width of the longest word, it will try to uh, give the size of the column matching this length. And what it is doing is it is breaking all of the other words across different lines. Okay, so this is what this property tries to do, that it will try to set the width to the longest content which is available within this particular column. Then we are looking at max content. What this will try to do is basically try to fit everything in a single line. So when I set, it will not break anything, it will try to fit the maximum content. Okay, so this is what it is doing. The first item, whatever is the maximum content, whatever is the entire length of the content, it is trying to fit that. So that is why this element has this much space. The next one is slightly wider. And if you notice the third item, this is the total length for it. And what happens when we set the value as max content, if enough space isn't available, it might overflow out of its container. So this is possible with the max content option. All right, now fit content is similar to max content, right? It will try to fit all of the contents in a single line, as long as it is not overflowing the container element. The moment it notices that this is overflowing the containing element, it will wrap the text to the next line. So let's look at fit content, and you can see that if it try to add more words, right, over here, it would have probably overflown out of this box. So this is what fit content is doing. It has wrapped all of the contents so that the maximum size has been taken up, and the elements are not flowing out of the container. So this is these are the different intrinsic values that you can set. It's not that these values are just available within grid. You can also use these values, min content, max content, and fit content, even outside of grid. So for example, we have this section, right, and we specify the width as min content, right? So you can see that whichever is the largest word, it try to give a width of that much. And if we say max content, you can see that once again it has moved to the same line. And if we say fit content, the result is similar. All right, so you can even use these values for widths even outside of the grid layout. So it's not specific to just grid layout, but it's within grid, it allows us to determine the size of a column. Okay, so is this clear to you guys? The link to the portfolio is available on the Devsnest website. I'll share it with you guys towards when we take a break. Just remind me once. I'll share the link in the chats as well. Okay. Okay. Let's move on to the next topic. So far we have seen how to, specify the width of a column using different units, or we have these, intrinsic values available to us. The next option is that we'll be looking at is known as a fraction. So let me open this example. Okay. So if we look at this, we have the same container and it has 5 items, and we have display grid. Each column is having a width of 200 pixels. So we have 3 columns of 200 pixels each. The first row's height is 200 pixels and the second row's height is 40%. Let me close this. Okay, so this is the layout which has been created. So another unit which is available to us is known as a fraction. Okay, so we specify a fraction using the fr keyword like this, and you can see that uh, this is basically allowing us, so whatever is the width, okay, this entire width which is available, and we have 3 columns, right? And if we were to divide that space equally, we would, get a certain number. So a fraction represents, that number basically. So if I replace all of these with a fraction, okay, one fraction like this. So you can see all of the items have been, whatever is the total space available to us, okay, for a particular row, it is stretching out all of the contents and equally dividing it, right? Since I have said all of the columns should take up one fraction, we have equal sized columns over here, okay? And suppose I want that the second column should take up twice the available space, right? So it should be twice of the original size of a fraction. So I specify over here 2fr, and you can notice that the second column, all right, which is this one, both of the items in the second column are twice the size of these the other items. And suppose I want that the this is one fraction and the last one is thrice the size. So you can see that this one is taking up thrice the space, this is twice, and this is one fraction. So this is a very useful unit which is available just within CSS grid. It allows us to specify the size in terms of fractions. All right, so I hope this is clear to you guys. Now let's look at a couple of functions which are available to us within CSS grid. So we will be looking at the first example. So suppose we have this, right? We have this columns. We have specified we want 3 columns, okay? Now, if you remember the earlier example, we had specified one fraction like this. So we wanted 3 columns and all of the columns have the same dimension. So we have a function available to us known as repeat. So the first parameter that it accepts is the number of columns that we want, or the number of columns that we want to repeat. So suppose we want to repeat 3 columns, right? And the size for that column is one fraction. Okay, so instead of writing one fraction, one fraction, one fraction thrice, we can just write repeat. We want to repeat 3 columns and the size of the columns is whatever unit, so it can be one fraction or 200 pixels. Okay, like this. So you can see that each of the items have a size of 200, 200 and 200. Okay, and if I specify a fraction, so all of them have been divided into fractions, and whatever are the dimensions of a fraction have been set as the width. Okay, so this is what the repeat allows us to do. We can also specify a combination of repeats and a regular. So suppose we want the first column to have a width of 200 pixels, right? And the next 2 columns have the same dimensions. So we can say the first column is taking up 200 pixels and the next 2 columns we will repeat. Okay, so you can see that this is taking up 200 pixels and the others are fractions, right? And it has been repeated. So you can combine a regular way of specifying a column along with this repeat option. Okay, so that is how you can have multiple fractions. Another combination that we can do is, suppose what I want is I want to repeat two this is one column and I can specify multiple columns over here as well. I want to repeat a particular pattern, right? So something like this, for example. Okay, so the first item is taking up 200 pixels. So if you notice, how many columns do we have? This is the first column. Then we are repeating this pattern twice, right? So first column, second column, third column, and since this is being repeated twice, so once again this pattern will be arranged. So then we have fourth column and fifth column. Okay, so you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have all the 5 items in the same row like this because we have arranged them in this particular pattern. Okay, so you can have repeating patterns as well. Okay, so this is the repeat function. Let's look at another example of a function which is known as minmax basically. So let me close this example and let me open this one. The next function that we will be looking at is minmax basically. Okay, let me comment this particular thing out. Okay, so we have these items. Okay, first item, second item, third item, fourth and fifth, 200 pixels each. The first row is taking up a height of 200 pixels and the next row 40%. Okay, or if I specify a value over here as auto, you can see that it has automatically sized that second row so that it does not overflow out of the container. All right, okay, so suppose what we want to do is we want to specify a range. All right, we want to specify that Each of these items should have a minimum value of say 200 pixels, and the maximum value that it can take up is one fraction. Okay, so what we can do is we can say minmax like this, and the minimum width is say 200 pixels, and the maximum that it can take up is a fraction. So what we want to do is we have 3 columns, right? So we will say repeat like this, and we will set this like this. So we can see that we have 3 columns over here. Let me get rid of this width. Okay, yeah. So we have 3 columns over here. If we inspect this, whatever is, size of a fraction that has been set, because that is the maximum value. Now let me make this responsive. All right. Okay. So as we are changing the dimensions, you can notice that um, suppose we are at a width of 844 pixels. All right, so this has a width of 264. Okay, and if I reduce it further, you can see that the total dimension is 502, and since we had set a min value of 200, it is not shrinking beyond that. Okay, as space is available, it will try and expand it, since we have specified the unit as we have specified the unit as one fraction over here. So between this range, right, it will try and size the items within the grid. All right, so it will go up to a minimum of 200. It will not go below that, but if more space is available, it will basically expand the size of the column like this. So this is what min max allows us to do. It allows us to basically specify a min value and a value. Suppose we specify this as 400 pixels. Okay, so the items will have a width between the column will have a width between 200 to 400 pixels. Okay, suppose I specify this as 300. And if we inspect this, you can see that the dimension is 200 by 200 right now. Okay, and right now it is 264, right? And you can see that now I'm at the full screen resolution, and there is the space available, because we have said that this should not go beyond 300 pixels, so it will stop at 300 pixels. If I set it back to this value, you can see that it has stretched to fill up that space. So this is this is kind of a responsive way of how you can determine the size of the columns. All right. um, the next property that we want to look at is, so far we know we have defined the number of columns that we want to show. Okay, but what if we have a scenario where we do not know how many columns are going to come? So for that purpose, we have a we can use this combination. Suppose we want that the width of the column should lie between 200 pixels to one fraction, but we do not know what is this value, like how many columns we will have. So we can make use of the repeat function and a special property known as auto fill. Okay, so what this is basically trying to do, that you know it will try and fit as many of the items possible in a particular row, right? So let me add a couple of more items over here. Okay, as I am let me not even do that. As I'm shrinking this, you can see that it is basically arranging the items in rows. So so what is possible is that it allows us to, you know if we do not know the number of columns which are available to us, and we want to arrange those items based on the space which is available to us, we can make use of this without specifying the number of columns which we want to you know which is there. So automatically it will adjust the items that can fit in a particular row. It will it will figure out how many items it can show in that row, which matches the the dimensions which we have specified over here. All right, so if you notice over here, only 4 items can fit. All right, if I am reducing the size further, 3 items can fit. All right, based on this min max value. Okay, suppose I get rid of this min max, and I'm just saying that the column should take up 200 pixels. Okay, so we can see that all 5 of these can take up 200 pixels, but if for this particular width, let me go to the responsive mode. All right, so for this width up to 1100 or something, all 5 items can fit. If I reduce it just a bit, you can see that this item which has the width of 200, it will not fit. So it will just position 4 items. All right, and so on. So you can see that this is basically possible. And the reason why only this item is taking up so much width is because we have specified the uh, grid template rows, and we are saying that the first row should take up 200 pixels and the default value is auto, right? So if we comment this out, you notice that the default value is auto. Okay, so now all of the items have the same height. Okay, and if we use the min max way, right, min max, and we set it back to one fraction, it will stretch and it will we will not have any additional space. All right, so this kind of allows us to uh, determine the number of columns without actually knowing uh, how many items are there. So we can do that using this autofill option. Similarly, we have another property known as autofit. Okay, let me change this to say 300, and let's keep this as autofill only. Okay, and there's another option known as autofit basically. Let me set this back to 200. So when we set it to autofill, okay, there isn't much of a difference. Give me a second, actually, because of the screen resolution. All right. So I have set it back to 110. Just try to observe. Maybe things are not visible to you, but I wanted to show you the difference between the two. So when we have it set to autofill, you can see that it's only taking up whatever space uh, we have this space lying around over here. All right, and when we set this to auto fit, right, whatever is the extra space that will collapse. So you can see that it is spacing all of these items and stretching it across so that all of the items can fit in a single row. And when we use the autofill option, it will try to basically fill up all of the spaces, right? So let's take a look at the width. So it is somewhere around 200 and something. So it will try and fill the columns which we have defined, which the items can take up. So it says that these 5 columns can come, but we will still be having, so these many basically columns we can have, right? We don't have enough items, so it is leaving out the space for those items, based on the calculation that it has done. According to this, at this width we can have 6, 7 and 8. A total of 8 columns can fit. Okay, but when we specify the option as auto fit, it sees that we do not have more columns coming up, right? So it just takes up the entire space which is available. So these are the two ways by which you can determine how to you know uh, you can specify the number of columns without actually knowing the number of columns that can come, and you can use this trick to uh, specify the width for that column. So as I add more items over here, so let's add a couple of more items. With the autofill option, it is basically adding all of those. Now it sees that it cannot satisfy this condition of 200 pixels. No more of 200 pixels item can fit inside this space, so it has moved the next item to the next row. Okay, so that is what you can do as well when you do not know how many items might come inside a particular grid, right? Okay, so we have looked at the different ways by which you can specify. We have looked at a couple of different properties. Now the next thing that we want to look at is the placement, how items are placed. So let me just set this back to repeat 3, and let's say each of them takes up a 200 pixel width. Okay, now let's take a look at how to position these items within the container, how to place these items within the container. So let me select, and let me also add this back, and the second row should take up 200, let's say 300 pixels. Okay, like this. And suppose what I want is that all of these items should appear in the center, right? So what I can do is I can let's select the container. So we can see that the container has yeah Give me a second. Let me just adjust this so that you guys can clearly see both of the things. So we have this container element, right, where we have set the display to grid. At this level, what we will do is we will say justify content, and by default it is start like this, and we want to specify center so that all of the items are now appearing in the center, right, like this. And suppose we just have 3 items. Let me comment this out. So we just have 3 items, and what we want to do is we want to say justify content to the center, so these items are appearing in the center, and I want them to vertically also appear in the center, so I will say align content to center as well. It's not doing that because I have this row over here, right? So let me get rid of this second row. Okay, and suppose the width of the container, not the width, the height of the container is 100 vh, which is the viewport height. And you can notice that it has centrally aligned the items, right? So vertically also it has placed the items in the center, and horizontally also the items are in the center of the container. So we can do that using the justify content and the align items property. Otherwise, there's a shorthand option available to us known as place content. Okay, suppose we want that the items should remain at the start, but they should be vertically aligned in the middle. So we can say that the align property has been, actually I've set it the other way around. What I want is that this should be in the center and this should be at the start, like this. So you can see that the content starts from this position and vertically it is aligned to the center. Okay, so you can make use of this property to specify multiple values, which is just a shorthand for both of these properties together. So you can either specify them individually or specify them like this. Okay, then the next property that, so similarly we have something known as end, right? Justify at the end, then align this at the end, right? Both the values are same, so we can just specify one value. So from the in the horizontal direction it is towards the end, as well as in the bottom of the screen. So this is how you can move around. So if we specify start, for example, it is the top right, right, sorry, the top left, right? Similarly, if we want that the alignment should be at the start, right, and the item should be at the end, so we can do that like this. So we have various options available to us, right? Now what we want to do is let's get rid of this. Suppose what we want is the content, right, which is within this box. We want to align this. For that purpose we make use of the align item property, and we set it to center, right? So you can see that all of these items have been placed in the center. Okay, and similarly if we want that these items are horizontally aligned at the center, we say justify items center. Okay, so now these have been centrally aligned. uh, let's give a class for, let's add some properties for this item as well. Let's say let's not do that. Actually, let's just take a look at the layout, and you can see the lines over here, right? So this is the entire width of the column, and it has horizontally aligned the item to the center. And just like we had where is it, yeah, just like we can specify, we can place contents. There's a shorthand for the items as well. Place items, and when we say place items to the center, whatever is the content within the column, that is positioned at the center. So we have similar options. Suppose you want to show this over here, we will say end like this. So all the items have been aligned at the bottom left. Okay, so to align the content which is in within a track, right? This is a track, right? We can make use of the place items property, and to align the entire track itself, we can make use of the content property. Okay, so I hope the difference between both of them is clear to you guys. You can let me know in the comments if it is clear, and we'll just take a okay, let me cover another property, and then we'll take a short break. All right, so it's clear. So another option that is available to us is how the content is written. Okay, let me do a refresh. So right now the content is written like this, right, left to right. So there's a property known as writing mode. Let's make use of that, writing mode. So by default it is horizontal. Suppose we want the text to appear vertically from left to right. So you can see that the text is now appearing from left to right in the vertical direction. Okay, and this has, and the reason we have it like this is because there are some languages which are written from top to bottom, right? So we can make use of this option to change the writing mode. If I want to set it back to horizontal, you can see we can do that as well. So languages like Cantonese or Mandarin, which are written from top to down, we have this option. Similarly, we have a couple of other options over here. Vertical, uh, like this, right to left. So these are like different options which are available to us. Okay, so which allows us to change the way the content is placed. All right, so that is known as the writing mode property. So what we'll do now is just take a quick break, and if you guys have any doubts, you can ask me in the comments. So I think I am also not 100% sure about this, but I think this is a grid only property, the writing mode. There's another question: when should we use CSS grid? Uh, before CSS grid was introduced, I usually used to reach out to Flexbox, but of late I have been using grid quite a lot because of the different functions and properties which are available. But I think grid is a bit complex at times to begin with. People find it easier to use Flexbox, but if I want to do something very simple and straightforward, and if it is easier to do using Flexbox, I would do it. I don't have a very clear answer for this, but sometimes I just know that based on the thing that I'm trying to achieve, it would be easier to use Flexbox or grid. It is something that will come with practice, right? And there is another question: when we are using autofit in grid template columns, the min max's value is not actually used, right? uh, it is used, so it does not go below, like we had set a min max range of 200, right? It does not go below that, so it does use that value. Probably not the way we are thinking, but it is definitely used in case of autofill as well as autofit. um, if you notice that in case of autofit, it's expanding the size of the items to take up the entire space which is available. All right, let's move on to the next topic. And actually, there is another thing which I wanted to cover. So far, if you guys have noticed, all of the items have been arranged, horizontally. That is, they have been arranged in rows. Suppose I want to change that. Okay. So let's uncomment these items. Okay. And what we want is that all of these items should be placed in columns. Okay, the arrangement should happen in terms of columns. Right now it is happening in rows. Okay, so first item, second item, third item, then fourth item, fifth items, like this and so on. Suppose we want to change that order, so in order to do that, we will say we will make use of the this property known as grid auto flow. And if we set it to column, you can notice that all of the items have been arranged in terms of columns, right? So first item, second item, third item, fourth item, fifth item, and the remaining items, so on. Okay, earlier they were laid out like this, and the next, they were wrapped like this. Now the wrapping is happening like this. Okay, I mean the arrangement is happening like this. Okay, so that is how you can change the behavior of how the items are arranged. So if we do not specify anything, by default it is row. Okay, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on. If I set it back to column, it is arranged in columns. So that is something that you can take care of. There's a confusion between justify content and align items. I'll take it up in the Discord doubt session, okay, right after the class. All right, I think we have covered quite a lot of topics related to CSS grid. um, there are a couple of more concepts that we will look at in the next class. So the next topic for today that we will be looking at is our shadows basically. So let's move on to the example for that. Let me stop this from here. Okay. So let's go over the code really quick. So there's this body tag. Inside that we have a section which has a class cards, and then within that there's another section which has a class card. There's a header and there's a heading, and then there is some content, okay, which is what we are seeing over here. Let's take a look at the CSS. The card, the container has been set as a display of flex, and the content has been placed in the center. The card has a width of 300 by 300. Since we have specified center, that is why was appearing over here. And let me add that once again. So that is why this card is now appearing in the center. Now what we will be learning now is known as the box shadow property. So you want to specify a box shadow for the card. The way we do it is we say box shadow, okay, like this. Box shadow. Then the first value that we specify is known as the horizontal offset, which basically indicates whether the shadow appears on the left or on the right. So let's give a value of say 5 pixels. Okay, nothing has happened yet. The actually, let me set the shadow first and then I will explain you the difference. So vertical offset of 5 pixels. All right, so you can see that vertically, if we want the shadow to appear on the right edge, we give a positive horizontal offset. If I give a negative value, say -5, the shadow will appear on the left like this. Okay, so positive value for the horizontal offset gives the shadow over here for this element, and a positive vertical offset gives the shadow at the bottom. If I want the shadow to appear at the top, I will give a negative value like this. Okay, then there's something known as the blur radius. Okay, so how blur the shadow is determined by this. So let's set this to say 5 pixels. So you can see that it is blurring out. Earlier it was very sharp, now it's becoming a bit blurry. So let's increase this value. Okay, let's set it to say 20, and let me get rid of this border for now. Okay, so you can see that this is the blurring of that shadow that is determined by this third parameter. Then we have a fourth parameter available to us known as the spread radius. So which basically determines how far the shadow is spreading. So let me set it to say 1 pixel. So if I specify the value, you can see that this shadow is spreading, right? So let's keep this at 6 pixels like this. And the last property is the color of the shadow. So by default it is black. Suppose I want to give it some shade of blue, so I will say 240 degrees. Then to specify how bright that blue is, I want it to be very vibrant, so let's make it 80%. And the next, whether it's on the light shade or on the darker shade, so I want the shadow to be light, so let's give this as 90%. So 90% would indicate that it's a very light value. So you can see that using this we can specify the we can change the color of the shadow basically. Okay, let's make this a bit dark. Let's set this to say 50, and let's spread this a bit more. Rather blur this a bit more, so you can see that there's this shadow effect, and let's spread this slightly less like this. Okay, so you can see that we have basically defined a shadow for our card. Okay, so is it clear to you guys how we can specify a shadow? This is known as the horizontal offset, the first value. The next value, right, you can see this over here using this tool. When we click on this, we can change the x and y values. We want the shadow to appear in the top, uh, you know top left, right? So we can have negative values for both x and y. If I change it to this, right, if you want a shadow in all directions, you can basically set this to 0. X and Y offset should be set to 0. So you can see that the shadow is appearing in all directions. When you want it in a particular direction, you can, give it something like this. How much you want to blur, you can control it using this. How far to spread the shadow, that is determined by this. Okay. And suppose you want to give the shadow towards the inside, so we can make use of the inset property, and now you can see that the shadow is within that element. So by default it is outset. If you specify the value as inset, the shadow will appear inside. So you can see that this has been set to inset like this. Let's make this much lighter, like 90%. And if we remove that inset keyword, you can see that the shadow is appearing outside once again. All right. So any color value you can specify over here. And this is how you can add shadows around elements. Okay. So I hope this is clear to you guys. What is box shadow? This is the first type of shadow that we can apply. Similarly, we can apply multiple shadows as well. So let me just copy this and let me give a comma. Let me paste this. All right. And let's change the dimensions for this. Let's give it a different color, say royal blue, for example, or just blue right now, blue like this. So you can see that we have multiple shadows, and let's change the dimensions for this particular shadow. So this is how you can add multiple shadows as well. Suppose we are giving all negative values over here, -3, -4, -8. Oh, minus would indicate it's not spreading, right? It's not blurred out. And yeah, so let's increase this further, and something like this. So we have multiple colors. You can have another layer over here as well by specifying a comma and providing the next set of values. So that is how you can have multiple shadows as well. So let's pick another color like red, for example. So you can see that we have this, combination of this and these two colors basically, right? So this is how you can add multiple shadows to an element. Okay, so horizontal offset, vertical offset, the blur value, and the spread radius. Okay, and the color we can specify it like this or any other color format. All right, so this is how you can apply multiple shadows, just like how we can apply shadows to an element. We can apply shadows to the text as well. So for example, within the card, okay, the h1 we have a heading tag, right? And we want this to have a shadow, so I can make use of the property known as text shadow. All right, so let's just use these dimensions. Okay, let me copy this and let's paste this. Okay, so the difference between the two is that there is no spread value available. Okay, and let me just comment this out for now. Okay, let's fine tune this. So we have applied a red colored text shadow for this. Let me reduce the blur value, and you can see that, you know, this heading has a shadow as well, right? Okay, so this is how we can apply shadows to text as well. So suppose I change the color to white, you can see it, this shadow has been applied to this text. And just like how we can apply multiple shadows to box shadow, similarly over here also we can apply multiple shadows for text shadow as well. So the important thing to notice is that the inset property is not available, all right, for the text shadow, and neither is the spread radius available for text shadow. The blur itself is, sufficient enough to provide an effect. Okay, all right, so this is how you can apply the shadow for the text content. The next thing that we will be looking at is the drop shadow. So that is generally useful for images. Okay, it's available as a filter, so it works on images which are transparent. So for that purpose, what we will do is we will move on to the portfolio. Let me stop this. So I have the code for the portfolio available with me. Let me minimize this. Let's open this. So we have this image over here, right? Right now this has a background. Let me change this image to have a transparent background. So I have the image available with me. I have removed the background using an online background remover tool, and let me just open it and place it over here. So this is the image without any background, right? You can see that this one has this background, and this image doesn't have that background. And let's and this has a PNG extension. Let me change it, and you can see that this background is visible. This is a transparent image. Let me change the background over here, the background color. Let's just set it to this grayish color. And the way we apply a drop shadow is we make use of the filter property and we use the keyword drop shadow. Okay, so if I remove this, you can see there is no outline for this image. Okay, the moment I enable this, you can see there's an outline, there's a slight shadow which is coming. Let's give it a a royal blue color for the shadow. So you can now clearly see that the shadow has been applied to the image. All right, so drop shadow allows us to specify the shadow along the outline of an image, and the condition is that the image needs to be transparent. That is when it works properly. And the values are similar, that we have this 2 pixels or 3 pixels. The shadow will appear on the right hand side. If I give a negative value, it will appear on this side, right? And similarly, if I wanted to appear at the bottom, I give a positive value. If I wanted to appear at the top, I give a negative value. Then this is the blur value. All right, so how much the shadow needs to blur basically, which is determined by this. And the last option is the color. All right, so this is how you can specify the drop shadow. So these are the different options available to us for setting the shadows. All right, and similar to text shadow, we cannot set the value to inset, or neither do we have the spread spread value available to us. So this is how it works. I'll just add this, set this to black once again, and I'll just copy this styling and add this to the portfolio. Let's go to style.css and search for port the image, profile image, and we'll just set the filter over here and the color as black. Let's get rid of this border radius because we have gotten rid of the background, so it doesn't make sense to have a border radius now. So if you guys remember the homework from yesterday, we were supposed to add a dark theme based on prefers that scheme based on the system setting, right? Whether if the system is at the dark mode, we want to have a dark theme being applied, and if this system is at the light mode, we want to have this light theme available. Okay, so if you notice now, this is going on top of our header, right? This has introduced a bug, so it might be happening because of the Z index that we have set. Let's do one thing. Let's give our header a Z index of 1. So now it is going behind, the image is going behind, right? All right, so let's do the changes together. So what we want to do is we want to add a theme based on the system setting. So in order to do that, what we will do is define some custom properties at the root level. So let's place this with the root selector, which is nothing but the HTML tag. So if I save this, we still have the smooth scroll behavior. Now what we want to do is we want to define certain colors. So let's define a background color. All right, and let's set this to HSL of 240 degrees, which is a shade of blue basically. And we want it to be 80% saturated. That means basically we want it to be very bright. And if we set it to 100%, that means whatever these values are, they do not make any sense because this color will be completely light. As you can see over here, if I save this, you can see this white color is available. This is the default background color. Then the next thing that we want to do is we want to set a text color. All right, and we want to set the text color to HSL. Once again, we will use 240 degrees, and we will specify the saturation value as 95%. So the saturation level determines how vibrant the color is, right? So we want it to be very vibrant. And then we want the color to be dark, right? In the light mode, we want the font color to be dark. So we'll give a low value, say 8%. And let's save this. So you can see that we have this bluish black kind of a color. We are just defining custom properties right now. Then let's also define some font sizes. So font size small, for example, we'll be using these later on. So 0.5 rem is the small font size. Similarly, let's add a couple of more font sizes. Font size regular is 1 rem. Then font size large is 1.5 times, and font size extra large or XL is 2 rems. Okay, then what we want to do is we want to use these values, right? So within our body tag, we will say the background color is background color coming from the variable, right? So which is this right now. Similarly, we want to set the color, and we want to set that to the text color, which is black. Okay, so right now no changes have happened. Let's do one thing. Let's make use of the preferred prefers color scheme feature. So we will say media prefers color scheme dark. Okay, and then we will be rewriting or resetting the properties within the body tag. Let me copy these two values and let's paste it over here, and let's invert those values a bit. So the background color we want to be dark, right? So 100% represents a very light value. We want it to be dark, so let's set this to 5%. So you can see that it is having a dark color. Since it is night time right now, you can see that this all of the background color has been changed. I cannot read anything. So what I will do is I will invert the text color. So we want the text color to be white. So what we will do is we'll just set this to 100%. When I save this, you can see that the text is now visible. All right. And let's do one more thing. Let's change the color for this as well. So this is the intro section, right? What we will do is we will say intro color, and we will specify HSL, and we'll be picking a shade of gray basically over here. So let's give the value as 0, the saturation value as 0%, and the lightness to 85%. So it should give us a shade of gray basically. All right, you can see this, it is slightly grayish. Let me copy this, and within our media, right, let's paste this over here and invert this value. Let's pick a darker shade of gray, and let's set this to 18%. All right, and over here for our intro section, we will pick the background color from the intro color like this. All right, and let's open the inspector tools right now, and let me select rendering. So I'm within the rendering tab. What we want to do is we want to emulate the color scheme. So we will set the color scheme to light, and you can see that we have this light grayish color being shown, and we have all of this text, right? And when we are in the dark mode, we're using a darker shade of gray, and the text color has been set to white. Now let's quickly update a couple of values over here. So what we want to do now is we want to set these values across a couple of places. So we have modified at the level of the body. I also want to change the color of the header. So let's get rid of this border. And for the background, we will say it has the same background as the background color. Okay, and let's get rid of this border as well. And then for the menu button, basically we want to do something similar, that the background should come from, so it is getting that background right now. Let's should come from the background color. To access the variable, we make use of the var property, and the font color should be picked up from the text color, right? So the color property we will set as text color like this, and what we want is not within the menu. Actually, we want to do this for the button, right? So where is the button? Button is here. Instead of having a transparent background, we can set it like this. So you can see that this text is appearing in white. Then similarly, what we want to do is whatever is the border color, we want that to match the text color, right? So we have this white outline now, and the other thing that we want to do is let's update all of the places very quickly. So we have done that for the header. The next tag is the navigation. We want to set the we do not want to have any color for this, or rather we want to say that this inherits the color, right? And when the child has visited this, basically, so for the visited state as well, we want to say the color is inherited, right? Then what we want to do is when we are hovering over this element, we want to set the text. We don't need the text decoration, but we want to set the color in that case to another color. Let's define another color, secondary color, and the value for that is, let's pick a shade of royal blue. And what we will be doing is we will be using HSL to update its value slightly. So let's make it more bright or more vibrant. Let's set this to 85%, and let's set this to rather let's keep it at 57%. And as we are hovering over these elements, we want to make use of the secondary color, right? So, and we also want this when the anchor tag has been visited, so we will say on hover, as well as when the anchor tag has been visited and it is in the hover state, right? In all of those scenarios, we want it to have this color. And let's get rid of this text decoration. Only when we are hovering, the color is changing, so that is good enough for us, right? Similarly, the next thing that we want to do is we want to add we want to remove this. Let's give a default font size. So we want to say font size is font size is large. Throughout the application, you can see that this has broken, but just for the navigation, we want the font size to be font size regular. All right, and rest of the text, the size has increased. The next thing that we want to do is we had defined this size at the level of the paragraph. Let's get rid of that. And if you notice, all of these labels, they have a pretty large font size, right? So over here we will say font size as font size small. Now this becomes too small, so let's switch back to regular, and you can see that it is back to the regular size. And let's try and play around with this in the responsive mode. Let's pick iPhone 10R. Let's open the navigation menu, and you can see that the background color for this has been lost. What we want to do is, so this is coming from the section, right? So the background, it should pick from the background color variable. So you can see that this has a black background. Okay, and we want to increase the font size. So section, menu, nav, and within that we want to target the anchor tag, and the font size should be the large font size. So you can see the font size has been increased for all of these links, right? And let's refresh this. And we can no longer see that, that closing button basically. So we need to change the color for that as well. Let's take a look at the element that we had defined for that. So this is our menu and the button, and it has the ID close menu. Let's search for this within our styling file, right? And the background was transparent. Let's give it a font color, not font color, we want to just set the color for this, and we will make use of the text color variable, and you can see that this is back. And let's set the font size to font size large. Okay, it is having no impact. Let's make it extra large. So you can see that this has been set to extra large. When we click on this, the menu is collapsing. Okay, so this is working correctly, and most of the things are, you can read all of this. Now let me change the width to full screen. Let me get out of this mode. Okay, and all the text is visible. We have kind of given it a dark theme. We will be improving the color combinations as we proceed. And what we want to do is, let's go to the rendering option. Let's pick the light scheme. So when we are in the light scheme, this is how we are seeing all of the content. And when we are in the dark scheme, this is how we are seeing our website. Okay, so we have added this light and dark scheme to our portfolio. So any doubts on this so far, how we made all of the changes? So we defined variables over here. These are the color variables, and when we are in the dark mode, we are just giving a different value for all of these. And we are just, wherever we were making use of colors, we have replaced those values with the appropriate color values that we need to use. And as the theme changes, it will pick up these variables and those values would be used, and that is how you can easily switch between different themes. Okay, so is it clear to you guys? Can let me know in the, yeah, we will be so right now this does not work with that button, the light and dark button. So this is working. So when we view this website at the daytime, uh, it will have that light color theme. As we move on to the night, it will have this dark theme automatically. So your system or your OS is defining the color theme, right? That is what this media prefers color scheme allows us to do. Later on we'll be adding that option of having a button over here, and when we click on that button, it will allow us to toggle between light mode and dark mode. Okay, we'll look at that a bit later on. So let me know if you have any doubts for this. Okay, so no doubts for this. Let's do one thing. Let's modify this section of technologies. Okay, so we have learned about flexbox and grid, right? Let's use that knowledge and convert these. So what we will do is, let's open our code. Let's go to index.x, HTML, and we have the section for technologies. What we want to do is, when we have the ID as technologies, okay, we want to say display. You guys want to learn how to use flex or grid? You can let me know in the comments. We will do it using that particular option. All right, so okay, we'll practice with grid. Okay, since most of you are saying grid, so we will just call it as grid. So we have set this element display style to grid. Okay, so far this is the change which has happened. All of the items have been stretched. So instead of a table, what we will do is we will have subsections over here. We want 3 sections, right? Okay, and actually let me do it like this. We want 3 sections, and the sections should have a heading, rather a header, and within that there should be a heading. Okay, so we have created this structure, and the section should have a class of card, for example. All right, so we have the structure available. All of these sections have a card class, and there's a header, and what we want to show over here is we will copy these things. So for the first section, the heading should be front end. For the next section, the heading should be backend, and for the third section, the heading should be database, like this. Okay, then for the content, let's create another section. Let's copy these. Let me paste it over here, and instead of the td tags, we will replace these with sections. Or what we can do is we can call these as list items, and we will move these inside a unordered list. So let's do it over here like this. Okay, so we have something like this available under database. And similarly, let's copy this and paste it under backend. Let's replace all of these with list items and move these inside unordered lists. All right, so we have front end, back end, and database. Similarly, let's copy what is remaining. Yeah, this is what is remaining. Hang on, I made a mistake, right? I'll fix it. So this needs to come here, then this needs to come here, then MongoDB needs to come for the databases. This needs to move to the front end. This needs to go to the databases. Node.js needs to come to the backend languages. Okay, so I think we have all of the things in place. So section 1, section 2, section 3, and all of these are within the section itself. Did I miss something? Yeah, this needs to be outside of the header like this. Then we have the closing for the li. These also needs to go inside a ul tag like this. Something is broken, give me a second. We have the h2 tag, then we have a section. Okay, let me move this out for a minute. Opening and closing header, the ul tag. All right, the closing section comes here. Header, unordered list, within that the list items. This is the closing section. Then we have the next section. It has the header, it's unordered list, then the closing section, and then we have header, unordered list, and the closing section. And where are we closing this section? All right, so I need to get rid of this table tag now. Okay, so we have this structure now, right? Front end, back end, and database like this. Within these styles, we are saying display grid. We want to show these as 3 columns. So you'll say grid template columns, repeat 3 of them. Okay, and then we'll make use of the min max. We will set the default width to 300 pixels, and it will choose a range between 1 fraction and 300 pixels like this. Okay, let's get rid of the these bullet points. So we have the card class, right? What we want to do is the card class and the unordered list which are there within it, right? We want to say the list style to none, so it has gotten rid of all of those things. To understand how things are working, let's create a border of 1 pixel solid and white right now. So all of these have a border. We want all of these the heading to appear in the center, right? So the way we do that is we say place content center like this. or rather place items center like this. And let's give it a width of 100%. No, not this. Let's add a padding, and let's define the spacing regular as 1 rem, and we will say spacing regular over here, so there's certain padding. All right, and let's give this card a box shadow. Let's specify 3 pixels. It spreads by say 14 pixels. It is blurred by 14 pixels, spreads by 5 pixels for example, and it uses the secondary color. All right, so we have this kind of a effect. Let's do one thing. Let's get rid of this, and let's add a gap, and let's use spacing regular like this. So we have a gap, and we have, we want the heading to appear in the center, right? So within the card, and we target the header, and we will say align items to the center. Should we target the h1? Hang on a sec. So actually this is its own container, right? This is a different element. By default it is already centered, right, this header. So for the header, since this is, this container, this is not a grid, so this will not work. What we need to say is text align to center. So you can see this is now appearing at the center, and similarly these contents we want to appear in the center, right? So let's see what is this exactly. So within the section, these are the unordered lists. So if you look at this unordered list itself, this is a different, a different element, right? And we want its contents to be centrally aligned. Okay. Rather just this to be centrally aligned. Let's see how we can do that. So these are aligned. As we are reducing the space, this is, going to that part. Let's just give it a size of 1 fraction. So as we are reducing, let's replace this with auto fit, and let's specify the value as repeat. so that this becomes responsive, right? So we want to repeat 3 columns, and they should take up 1 fraction. So now we have less space available, right? As we are shrinking the content, it is, so each technology is appearing as a individual card, and as we're increasing the space, let's make use of the min max over here. Let's set this to 300 pixels and 1 fraction. Hang on a sec, am I doing something wrong? We are saying repeat, auto fit, and then this should not, this should not be repeat, right? This should be just min max like this. Okay, yeah. So the problem was that I was specifying repeat over here once again, so it was expecting more columns. So as we are, reducing the screen size, it is responsively adjusting the size of the columns. All right. So we have replaced the technology section with grid, the display grid, and we have given this box shadow kind of an effect. And what we want to do is we want to reduce this. Let's set this to 8 pixels. Okay, we want the shadows to be much more sharper than this, so this is what we have done. And if we switch to the light mode using the rendering option, let's see how it is appearing in the light mode. So we have this, so we will probably use a different box shadow color when we are in the light mode. Okay, so we can do so using a variable. We'll create a variable for that, or maybe you guys can try it out and then we can go over this later on. Okay, so we have modified this section using CSS grid. And for the content part, what we will do is, since we want to justify the content in the center like this, so by default this unordered list has this margin, right? You can see this margin which is coming along with this unordered list. So you can see that not margin, it has this padding. Let's get rid of this padding. We want to say padding as 0. Okay, and then within the unordered list you want to say justify, or rather text align center like this. So we have specified the technologies over here like this. Okay, or instead of doing this we could have made use of the align content and set that to center. Not align content, we want to say justify, not content items, we want to set those to the center. So you can see that all of the items have been set to the center, but the spacing has reduced, right? To fix that, what we can do is we can say that the card takes up the entire width which is available. So if we look at this technologies, right, and we go to the layout and we hover over this, you can see that The card is basically, since it is, we have said we want to justify the content towards the center, right? It's only taking up the space which it needs. So let's say that we want to set the width as 100% at the level of the card, so it will take up whatever space is available and it will fill up that space. Okay. All right. And so there is uh, some issue with this part, right? So we will figure out that in the next session, how to fix these kind of issues. We will figure out in the next session. So for now, we have replaced this section with a card, and the homework for you guys is to get the portfolio up to the same level that we have done today, and to create a separate variable for the box shadows, so that in the light mode there's a different box shadow color, and in the dark mode there's a different box shadow color. Okay, so that is the homework for you guys. Let's end the uh, session right now over here, and in case of any doubts, we will uh, I'll see you guys in the Discord channel. Okay, we can obviously center all of these using the text align property, but we don't want to do that. We want to see how to align all of the items within the card using the place items or the justify items property, and the size of the card should not shrink. So let's figure out if there's a way to do that, and I'll let you know in the next session. Or you guys can figure that out as a homework, and anyways we'll discuss it in the next session. Okay. All right, so I hope you guys have been able to follow along so far, and you're finding these sessions interesting. CSS grid, another way of arranging your content into rows and columns. Okay, so this is it, and I'll see you guys day after tomorrow.